we are sending the Fruit Dragon Elestral Drataya to Tartarus. This may come as a shock to many of you, but after weeks of discussion and playtesting, I'm going to be announcing a few updates to the banned and restricted list for Elestrals. To me, Elestrals is at its best when casters can use a wide range of strategies that highlight some of the coolest features in the game. Nexus, Ascensions, and fun combo plays. After watching the metagame develop over the last few months, from the tail end of Frostfall through our first 2 premier Daybreak events, we've noticed a trend in terms of power level, and I feel it's best to intervene to create a better, more dynamic metagame. I'm the first to admit that I'm not perfect, and it can be really challenging to replicate the competitive and casual landscape within our internal testing teams, but we always do our best to create fun and fresh cards to keep the game exciting. Since its inception, Elestrals has been dominated by powerful removal tools, and it's time to address some of these. Before I explain the problem at its core and how we plan to fix it, I want to give my thoughts on bans and restrictions as a whole. After talking to dozens of casual and top-ranking players in Elestrals and other games too, it's no secret that banned and restricted lists can cause disagreements in a community. We all want Elestrals to succeed, but we may have different visions on our ideal game. At its core, I believe a lot of these issues with other games come down to communication. Other TCGs often don't explain their choices or have ulterior motives when making decisions, leading to player frustration. I want to pledge to the Elestrals community these 3 things. 1. I will always openly communicate what changes are coming to the game, and most importantly, why. We may not always agree on these changes, but please know my focus is simply to create the best and most fun game I can. 2. We will not use future releases or monetary incentives to impact our bans and limits. What this means is if we have a problem card in the game that needs to be addressed ASAP, I won't delay on acting on it or have my decision influenced because it has a stellar promo card coming in a few weeks. I also hope that because our individual playable cards are relatively inexpensive, none of these changes will financially harm players in a frustrating way. And 3. I will always listen to community feedback to try to make the most informed decision. This doesn't mean your preference will always be what we do, but I can assure you that I will explore all sides of the coin before moving forward to the best of my ability. The recent Daybreak event featured 3 decks that in my opinion are problematic for Elestrals as a whole. Let's start with Drataya and the Waspire first turn KO. Drataya has been a card on my radar for weeks, and it's caused me to lose some sleep, I'm not gonna lie. My team heard whispers of an FTK or first turn KO led by Drataya's powerful draw engine a while back, and we began testing internally to determine how consistent it was. While in the recent tournament the deck didn't have the best results, we've concluded that because Drataya has shown to be a problematic card currently and will continue to cause concerns in the future, it will be sent to Tartarus and have an Escape from Tartarus version printed, slotted in set 5 alongside Spark It. While I personally love Drataya and I hate to see the fruit engine temporarily paused, the FTK deck is incredibly frustrating to play against and an unfair play experience. To summarize, players can utilize cards like Drataya, Ambrosia, and Ash Rabbit to draw their entire deck with incredible consistency, and then ultimately play into Exalt Flare and Waspire, winning the game before the opponent can even take an action. Not to mention, this 20+ card combo takes a long time to execute, wasting a lot of time and leaving the opponent sitting there doing nothing. While this strategy may be fun in fringe situations, it has no place in the Elestrals competitive scene. The next 2 decks that I believe are problematic to Elestrals are the 5 guys, or Big Body Beatdown as we call it, and the little guys, or Heal Stall. The Big Body Beatdown deck looks to play 1 Spirit Elestrals throughout the duration of the game, forcing opponents to respond. Cards like Lavalith and Resting on Your Laurels become incredibly powerful since the 5's deck does not need to establish any spirits on field outside of its 1 Elestral, and opponents who play Divines, Stadiums, or otherwise get punished really hard. This boils down to a game of attrition that completely invalidates a lot of the fun and unique strategies Elestrals has to offer, and while 5's can result in some very skill-intensive board manipulation, I believe Elestrals would be better off with this deck's power level reduced. Next, looking at the new emergence of Little Guys, a similar strategy that uses the endless removal tools in Elestrals to hold off an opponent's board state and stall them out with Quackles, Sluggles, and more, creating an incredibly frustrating play experience. We saw this deck make a splash in the early base set metagame, but it came back with a vengeance in Daybreak. Both of these decks rely on one thing to gain tremendous advantage, and that's removal. Specifically removal that punishes opponents for advancing their board state. With all that being said, after tons of deliberation and testing, we are going to be introducing a limited list for Elestrals, where cards can be restricted to 1 or 2 copies instead of the normal 3. I can definitely acknowledge that limited cards in other games can be looked at negatively, because it can cause bad feelings when someone draws that 1 card, but I do strongly believe it's justified in this case, and will create a better play experience overall. This limited list is designed to reduce consistency and frequency of various cards to allow other strategies and cards to thrive. The first of these cards that we'll be limiting to 1 copy is Lavalith. Lavalith was introduced as a card to quell the influx of counter runes and Elestrals, and increase the power level for the struggling fire deck. Ultimately, Lavalith has turned into an incredibly accessible tool that punishes players for even playing their Divine, or extending their field, and I believe this has come at the detriment of many cool and unique strategies in Elestrals. Its powerful 6 attack stat and rune destruction requires immediate answers, and I believe the game will be better with only 1 copy of Lavalith allowed. Running 1 Lavalith does impact the Spirit Math as well, as it will force players into tough decisions of whether the 2 Pyro are worth the squeeze. The next card we'll be limiting to 1 copy is Resting on Your Laurels. Laurels was designed as a comeback card, but it's turned into the key enabler for 5s and little guys. Laurels basically prevents players from wanting to use Divines, Stadiums, or Artifacts because your Elestrals just get wiped immediately. It's only 1 cost that can be used by virtually every deck, and I believe the removal tools, specifically on the Invoke side, have proven to be too strong. Lastly, the final card we will be limiting to 1 copy is Earthquake. Earthquake is a powerful earth removal rune that has become a necessity in most decks because its lack of restriction. It can, with no drawback, eliminate nearly every threat in the game, and having 3 copies of this card has proven to be too impactful for the rest of the format. Additionally, with 5s and little guys losing some of their removal tools, Earth Nexus logically becomes the next best deck, and the reduction of frequency with Earthquake will help bring the power level of that deck a bit closer to the others. One of my favorite parts of a card game is how the metagame can develop over time, how players can look at the recent event results and formulate a game plan to try to counter the metagame. I want nothing more than to encourage and enable this, and I hope that these changes to the game will result in a more diverse and healthy gameplay experience, one that highlights all of the awesome mechanics Elestrals has to offer, like Ascensions, Nexus, and more. I want to pop a few cards up on screen for each element that can be used as more conditional removal. All of the counter runes remain untouched, and cards like Kinleo, Veritaqua, Boombat, and Frostmite may just have a little bit more room to shine now. I'll leave the exploration to you as the players, but I look forward to seeing the next tournament results on October 6th. It's possible that in the future, Lavalith, Earthquake, and Resting on Your Laurels will be removed from this list, or other cards may join them. My team will continue to test and meet every month to discuss the state of the game and do what we believe is best to move it in a positive direction. These bans and restrictions will take place on October 1st when Drakid, Drakking, and Artemis all become legal. I look forward to your engaging discussions, and I appreciate your support to Elestrals.